2 weeks after I paid off my first car, I came home and it was gone. That sentence still feels fake to me. Like some glitch in my brain keeps thinking it must have been towed, or maybe I forgot where I parked it. But I remember everything about that day so clearly. Too clearly, honestly. It was warm out. Not hot, not cold. That annoying in-between temperature where you're not sure if you should leave the windows cracked or just trust the AC. I had just finished a long shift, drove home in my dark blue Corolla, my pride and joy, parked in my usual spot by the curb in front of our house, and headed inside for a shower and a nap. 30 minutes later, it was just gone. No broken glass. No trail of oil. Just a patch of empty asphalt and that weird, gnawing feeling in your gut when something isn't right. But I should back up a bit. Let me introduce myself before we get too deep. My name's Luke, I'm 26, and I grew up in a family that could be best described as chaotic neutral. Not outright abusive or anything, but definitely the type where boundaries were more like suggestions and personal property was a vague concept, especially if someone thought they needed something more than you did. My parents always emphasized helping family, but somehow that always meant me helping them, not the other way around. I moved out 2 years ago, finally saved enough to get my own place. A tiny but clean rental just outside my hometown. The kind of neighborhood where people mow their lawns and smile at you if you make eye contact, but still lock their doors and pretend not to hear anything after 9 p.m. I've been working 2 jobs since I was 21, warehouse during the day and restaurant shifts on weekends, scraping every extra dollar to pay off my car loan early. I know, it's not a Ferrari or anything, but to me, that 2014 Corolla was a symbol. Freedom, stability, proof that I could take care of myself without relying on anyone, without asking for handouts, especially from them. By them, I mostly mean my extended family. My Aunt Renee and her son Kevin in particular. My mom's younger sister has always had this weird mix of entitlement and delusion, like she's constantly waiting for some reality show producer to knock on her door and say she's the long-lost heir to a mansion in the south of France. Kevin, her son, is, well, he's the type of guy who peaked in middle school. You know the type. Played JV football in high school, but thought he was going pro. Got a tattoo of a lion on his bicep after 1 semester of community college, dropped out, and now blames the system for every failure in his life. He's 28, lives with his mom, and every few months he's either starting a new business venture or taking time to reflect after quitting whatever job he just got fired from. The last time we'd spoken, he looked me dead in the eyes at a family barbecue and said, "Man, I still can't believe you're working 2 jobs just to afford a Toyota. You really think that's something to brag about?" I just laughed it off. But I remembered. I always remember. And now here I was, staring at the spot where my car should have been, heart hammering in my chest. I called the cops. They showed up pretty quick, asked if I had any enemies or knew someone who'd want to mess with me. I told them no. Not really. But something felt off. It didn't feel random. There was no broken glass, no signs of forced entry. Whoever took it had the keys, or knew where I hid the spare. But only 2 people had ever seen me hide the spare in the magnetic box under the wheel well, my mom and Kevin. It didn't hit me until later that night. My phone buzzed while I was sitting on the couch, nervously sipping coffee and waiting for the officer to call back. The message was from an unknown number. No words, just a picture. It was my car, parked in a different driveway. Kevin standing next to it, shirtless, grinning, throwing up peace signs like it was some kind of victory lap. I stared at the image, disbelief morphing into fury. I didn't even have time to respond before my phone started ringing. It was my Aunt Renee. "Hey, sweetie," she chirped, like nothing was wrong. "Listen, don't panic, okay? Kevin's just borrowing your car for a bit. He's going through a lot right now. Starting fresh, you know? He deserves a break. I mean, you've got your own place now, right? You can manage without it for a little while." I sat there in stunned silence, phone pressed against my ear, trying to process what I had just heard. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like I was the unreasonable one for not wanting my fully paid-off vehicle to be stolen by a cousin who hadn't worked a full week in years. "You what?" I finally choked out. My voice cracked. I felt my jaw tighten. "Are you out of your mind? That's my car. I just reported it stolen." Renee laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. It's not stolen. It's family. Kevin just needed it more than you do right now. We'll bring it back when he's back on his feet, promise." I didn't respond. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't even hang up. I just stared at the wall and let her keep rambling, my pulse in my ears, my mind racing. That voice in my head, the same one I'd learned to trust over the years, whispered one word. Prove it. I hung up and stared at the photo again. I didn't know how long Kevin planned on borrowing it. I didn't care, because I had the title. I had the registration. And now, I had proof. And what I did next? Let's just say, Kevin wasn't expecting a uniformed officer and a clipboard in his driveway the next morning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced. I rewound every interaction, every family get-together, every insult disguised as a joke, every time someone called me too sensitive for setting a boundary. I thought about the hours I'd spent working to earn that car, the nights I came home too tired to eat, the bags of fast food in my passenger seat, the quiet little smiles I'd make to myself every time I hit a green light, because that car was mine. And now they were treating it like it was some community bicycle. But it wasn't just about the car. It never is it? It was about respect. The kind that was never given to me freely. The kind I had to claw for in every room I stepped into with these people. And that night, something shifted. Because I wasn't going to ask nicely anymore. I was going to show them. But before I could do that, I needed a plan, and a name on the police report that would stick. And that meant visiting someone I hadn't seen in months, someone I'd deliberately avoided. My mother. Because if anyone knew exactly how deep this rabbit hole went, and how much my family thought they were entitled to, it was her. And what she said when I showed her the picture, it changed everything. I didn't want to go back. Not to that house. Not to the memories. Not to the old roles we all used to play like a script nobody bothered rewriting. But I needed answers. I needed to know just how far this went. If this was a one-time betrayal or something deeper, more deliberate. I wasn't naive enough to think Kevin acted alone. That smug photo, the way Renee talked down to me like I was some stubborn toddler throwing a tantrum, it all felt too rehearsed. So the next morning, I drove over to my mom's place. In my friend Matt's car, because mine was still at Kevin's. She lived about 20 minutes away from me in the house I grew up in, a modest two-story with faded yellow siding and a front porch that still had the same wind chimes from when I was 12. I used to like the sound of those chimes. Now they felt like a taunt, a reminder of how little things had changed here. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. I saw the police report, she said flatly, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. You really called the cops on Kevin? There it was. Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Not, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Just judgment. Disappointment. Like I was the one who stole something. I stepped inside without waiting to be invited, the weight of everything pressing on my shoulders like a storm cloud ready to burst. Yeah, I did, I said. Because my car was stolen. And I'm not going to let it slide just because he's family. She sighed, turning away like she couldn't even bear to look at me. You always make everything so dramatic, Luke. Kevin's had a rough year. He lost his job, his girlfriend kicked him out. So that means he gets to steal my car? He didn't steal it, he borrowed it. Renee said she tried calling you before he took it. That was a lie. I checked my call log. No missed calls. No voicemails. Nothing. Did she also tell you he sent me a picture posing with it like it was some kind of trophy? I asked, pulling out my phone and showing her the image again. That doesn't scream borrowed. That screams theft. She didn't even look at the picture. She just sat down on the worn floral couch and stared at the floor. You know how Kevin is. Yeah, that's the problem. I was shaking, not out of rage, but from something deeper. Hurt. That gnawing, bitter kind of hurt that only comes when people you love look right past you like you're invisible. Like what matters to you doesn't even register. I'd seen it before, too many times. Every Christmas where Kevin got the new gaming console and I got socks. Every family cookout where he got the last burger, even if I hadn't eaten yet. Every snide remark that went unchecked. Every time I succeeded at something and got met with silence. Or worse, resentment. It was always Kevin. Always. I remember once, when I was 15, I won a regional art competition. I'd spent months on the piece, a charcoal sketch of our neighborhood park from memory. It won first place. I brought home the ribbon, beaming. Mom barely looked up from her show. That's nice, she said. The next weekend, Kevin passed his driver's permit test on the third try and got a full party, cake, balloons, and $100 in cash. It wasn't just favoritism. It was erasure. And now it was theft. I stood in her living room, trying to keep my voice steady. So that's it. You're really going to defend him after this? She finally looked up at me. He just needs a win, Luke. I blinked. And what about me? I finally pay off my car. I finally get some stability, and the first thing that happens is he rips it away from me. And you're worried about him needing a win. The silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I left without another word. That week was a blur of quiet rage and simmering disbelief. I worked my shifts like a robot, trying not to spiral. The police were moving slow, standard procedure. They said, since the suspect was a relative and I knew where the car was. But without escalation, they couldn't just barge in and tow it. I needed more. So I started documenting. I printed the text messages. I took screenshots of the photo. I checked local traffic cams near my house and found footage of my car leaving my street while I was inside. The timestamp matched perfectly. I even found an Instagram story Kevin had posted that same night, rapping along to some song in the driver's seat with the caption, "Fresh start, new whip, no stress." That stung. He was flaunting it like it was his. Like my hard work meant nothing. But the moment that broke me, that came a few days later when Renee called me again. "Luke, honey," she started, in that overly sugary voice that always meant she wanted something. "We've been thinking. Since Kevin needs the car more than you right now, and since you're being so difficult, we'd like to make you an offer." I didn't say anything. Just waited. "We'll give you $1,500 for it." I nearly dropped the phone. $1,500? $1,500. That car's worth triple that. Well, it was used, and now Kevin's already been driving it. So really, it's depreciated. I hung up. No yelling. No cursing. Just a cold, calculated click. Because I just realized something chilling. They weren't planning to return it. They were planning to buy me out of my own property. At a fraction of its worth. Like they were doing me a favor. I don't know how long I sat there after that call. Probably an hour. Maybe more. I stared at the wall until it stopped being a wall and became just white noise. Something cracked in me that day. Something I hadn't let myself feel in years. I wasn't just angry. I was done. Done playing nice. Done waiting for respect. Done letting people like Kevin skate through life while the rest of us bled for every inch. That was the breaking point. The next time I saw him, it wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be proof and authority and repercussions. And I knew exactly how to make it happen. Because if they thought this story ended with a bribe and a brush off, they clearly hadn't met this version of me yet. I didn't answer the phone for 2 days. Not for work, not for friends, not for family, especially not for family. I needed quiet, stillness, some kind of emotional reset after that call with Renee. Because what do you even do when someone tries to lowball you for your own car like it's a garage sale item they're being generous about? The silence helped. A little. At least enough to keep me functional at work. But I wasn't really there. I'd stock shelves, scan inventory, take customer orders, whatever the shift needed, but my mind stayed locked on that photo of Kevin flashing peace signs in my car like it was some rapper's album cover. You know that moment when you realize you're not angry anymore, just hollow? That's where I was. Rock bottom isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like sitting alone in your apartment, eating cold cereal at midnight, surrounded by unopened mail and dishes you're too tired to wash. It's feeling like nobody really sees you unless you're being useful to them. And for the first time in years, I started to believe what Kevin said to me at that barbecue. "You'll never amount to anything." That one had stuck with me, quietly, like a splinter under the skin. Even when I succeeded, part of me kept wondering if I was just playing dress up, pretending to be someone who had their life together. The car was supposed to change that. Owning it outright was my moment, my statement to the world. And now it was being driven around by the very person who made me feel small for daring to believe I was worth something. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Once you stop falling, you realize you can finally push back. And something about that emptiness, about having nothing left to lose, gave me a weird kind of clarity. So I made a list. Not a to-do list. Not exactly. More like a prove them wrong list. Every petty insult, every time I'd been written off, every time I'd been told to let it go or stop overreacting, I wrote it down. Not out of spite. Out of purpose. Because I needed to remind myself that my anger wasn't just valid, it was earned. And it could either eat me alive, or I could use it. So I started rebuilding. Not with some grand gesture, but with quiet moves no one saw coming. Step 1 was information. I called the DMV and confirmed that yes, the title was still in my name. Good. Then I went ahead and ordered a certified copy, just in case. I called my insurance company, reported the theft officially, gave them the incident number from the police. That started a whole paper trail. They told me to avoid confronting the thief directly again and to keep everything documented. No problem. I had screenshots, call logs, photos, the works. Then I visited the local magistrate's office, asked about how to proceed with a property recovery order. It took a few hours of waiting and some weird looks, but I walked out of there with a packet of forms and a clearer path. And while I was at it, I called a lawyer. I didn't know any offhand, so I asked a coworker who'd gone through a messy divorce last year. She recommended a guy named Mark DeLeon, small-time but sharp, and more importantly, affordable. I scheduled a consultation for the next week. All of this was quiet. Careful. I didn't post about it. Didn't confront Kevin. Didn't tell Renee I was talking to lawyers. I just let them keep thinking I was sulking in silence while I built the foundation under them. But outside of the plan, life didn't stop. And that's where the real rebuild began. Because in all of this, I had been pouring every ounce of energy into getting my car back. But somewhere in that obsession, I had forgotten why I'd worked so hard in the first place. It wasn't about the Toyota. It was about me. I didn't just want the car back. I wanted to take back the version of myself who believed I deserved good things. So I started showing up for myself again. I stopped skipping breakfast. Doesn't sound like much, but those few extra minutes in the morning helped me feel human. I went back to the gym, even if it was just 20 minutes on the treadmill. Got a haircut. Started replying to texts from friends I'd been ignoring, not with long messages, but just enough to say, hey, I'm still here. One night, Matt, my coworker and the guy who lent me his car, invited me over to hang out. We ordered wings and played video games. Nothing deep, just dumb fun. But in the middle of it, he looked over and said, you know, I've never told you this, but I've always respected how hard you hustle. Like, you actually try. That's rare, man. I didn't know what to say. It hit harder than I expected. Not because it was some profound compliment, but because it felt genuine. And I couldn't remember the last time someone said something like that to me without an agenda. After he left, I sat on my porch and stared up at the stars for a long time. Maybe I'd let people like Kevin define me for too long. Maybe I kept trying to prove myself to a family that was never going to clap unless I failed. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't need their approval to matter. The next week was a turning point. I met with Mark, the lawyer, told him everything, start to finish. I had the documentation ready, printed and neatly labeled in a cheap office folder. He listened, took notes, and asked sharp questions. When I finished, he leaned back and smiled. Luke, I've seen a lot of petty theft and family drama. This is a cocktail of both. But the good news is, you've got a solid case. You own the car. You've reported it. You've documented the unauthorized use. If we escalate it the right way, you're not just getting your car back. You might have a small civil suit for damages if he's caused any wear or devaluation. I blinked. Wait, I could sue him. If we wanted to, yes. But let's start with getting your car back. He explained how we could file for a writ of replevin, a court order to retrieve stolen property. It would take a couple of weeks, but once approved, law enforcement could legally show up at Kevin's and tow the car on the spot. No more phone calls. No more begging. Just consequences. And I'd get to be there. Something about that idea lit a fire in me. Not because I wanted to see Kevin squirm. Okay, maybe a little. But because it was the first time I'd felt like the system wasn't stacked against me. Like I wasn't crazy for being angry. Like the rules did apply, even to golden boys like him. Mark filed the paperwork, and we got a tentative hearing date. Until then, he told me to keep quiet, keep gathering proof, and avoid all contact. So I went back to work. Back to the gym. Back to me. And weirdly enough, I started to feel okay again. Even good. There's something powerful about having a plan. About waking up every day knowing you're not stuck, that you're doing something, that you're moving forward. I started sketching again in the evenings. Nothing fancy, just pencil on paper. Little scenes from memory, my street, the view from my old bedroom, a rusted swing set I used to play on. Art had always been my outlet, but I'd let it fade in the chaos. Now it was coming back, like a piece of myself I hadn't realized was missing. And here's the funny part. The less I focused on Kevin, the more power I took back from him. I wasn't chasing. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't explaining myself to people who had already made up their minds. I was just rebuilding. And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe I wasn't the broken one. They were. They were the ones who thought family meant control. That taking something and calling it love made it okay. That disrespect could be smoothed over with a laugh and a lowball offer. Not anymore. The day I got the call from Mark saying the court date was confirmed, I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. It was set for a Friday. 2 weeks out. Enough time to prepare. Enough time for Kevin to keep enjoying his new whip. He had no idea what was coming. And what happened at that hearing? Let's just say it wasn't just the car that got put in reverse. Kevin didn't know it yet, but the game was about to flip. And this time, I wasn't reacting, I was orchestrating. After the call with Mark confirming our court date, something shifted in me again. Not like the slow, painful rebuilding I'd done in the weeks prior. This was something sharper, cleaner, purposeful. If part 3 of this journey was about healing, this was about precision. See, I'd spent years being the nice one in the family. The peacemaker. The one who stayed quiet when people said something out of pocket. The one who picked up the slack when others dropped the ball. The one who forgave before apologies were even offered. But now, I was done playing the role they wrote for me. It was time to rewrite the ending. The first thing I did was stop calling it getting my car back. I started calling it what it was, taking back what's mine. There's a difference. One is passive. The other is a declaration. Mark and I spent the next few days prepping everything we'd need for court. We had documents, timestamps, a witness statement from my neighbor who saw Kevin drive off that night, and even a printed copy of Kevin's Instagram story with the car. I'm honestly surprised you didn't already post this all online, Mark said during one of our meetings. This would have gone viral by now. I shrugged. That would have felt like stooping. I don't want drama. I want results. He nodded, a little impressed. Good. Because you're winning this one clean. But legal prep wasn't enough. I needed leverage. And more importantly, I needed witnesses. I wanted my family to see what was happening. So I started making subtle moves. First, I reached out to Aunt Renee. Not with anger. Not with demands. Just a carefully worded text that read, "Hey, just a heads up. I've got a legal hearing scheduled about the car. They'll be contacting Kevin soon. No hard feelings. Just letting the system handle it. No punctuation. No emojis. No haha. Just straight, factual, unsettling calm." Her reply came 4 minutes later. "Luke, you're seriously still doing this? He's going to give it back. You just need to calm down. This is such an overreaction." I didn't reply. 12 minutes after that, Kevin texted me for the first time in weeks. "Yo, what's this about court?" "Chill, dude, I said I was using it for a bit. We're family." I read it. Let it sit there with the scene mark. Then locked my phone. Because here's the thing. I wanted them to feel the silence. The old me would have explained myself. Would have tried to smooth it over. But now, I wanted them off balance. I let the tension do the talking. And while they were panicking, I kept planting seeds. The next move was family. Not all of them. Just the ones who had always floated in the middle. The aunts and uncles who didn't pick sides, but still showed up at holidays with casseroles and passive observations. The cousins who weren't close, but weren't hostile, either. I called my Uncle Ray first. He wasn't close with Renee, but he was respected. I told him what happened. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Just the facts. He was quiet for a moment. Then said, "Wow. I had no idea. That's seriously messed up." "I'm not trying to start a war," I said. "I just want to set a line. And I need some people to see the line being drawn." He got it. "Say less. I'll be there." Then I called my cousin Jordan. She was always the neutral one, but smart. Knew when things were wrong, even if she didn't always say so. Same response. Shock. Support. Confirmation that she'd show up. By the end of the week, I had 5 family members planning to come to court with me. Not as angry protesters, but as quiet observers. Witnesses. People who'd never been asked to choose a side before. Kevin had always depended on that silence. That shrugging indifference. Not anymore. And then, I made the final move. I went to see my mom. I didn't want to, but something in me needed closure. Or maybe, confrontation. She opened the door and blinked like she didn't expect to see me. "Luke, I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to tell you that this is happening. Court date's set. I've got everything I need. You don't need to come. But when it's over, I want you to remember that I gave you a chance to see this side of the story." She didn't respond at first. Just stepped back to let me in. I walked into the living room. Same couch. Same wind chimes tapping against the window. But something in the air felt different. Like a script had been burned. "I know you love Kevin," I said, standing in the middle of the room. And I'm not asking you to stop, but I need you to understand something. Loving him doesn't mean enabling him. And loving me doesn't mean ignoring what's been taken from me. She sat down slowly. I didn't know it had gotten this far. That's because no one ever asks how far it's gotten for me, I said. They just assume I'll get over it. She looked up at me then, really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something behind her eyes that looked like guilt, maybe regret. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to minimize what you're going through. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. But I nodded. That was enough. The days leading up to court passed slowly. Every morning, I checked my email for updates. Every night, I sat on my balcony and breathed in the cold air like it was fuel. Kevin, meanwhile, went radio silent, probably realizing this wasn't just another family spat that would get smoothed over by potlucks and denial. I could only imagine how he was spinning the story in his head. Luke's overreacting. It's not like I stole it. He's just bitter I'm not working some dead-end job. But it didn't matter anymore. Because the day before court, I drove past his house, slowly, carefully, and saw my car still sitting in the driveway. Same dent in the passenger side door. Same air freshener hanging from the mirror. Still mine. And soon, it would be mine again. But this time, Kevin wouldn't just be losing a car. He'd be losing the illusion that there were no consequences for stepping on me. And the family? They were going to watch it happen. I parked around the corner, turned off the engine, and just stared at it. The silence inside my friend's borrowed car felt heavier than ever. Not sad, not angry, just calm. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't the underdog anymore. I was the reckoning. And tomorrow, the setup would pay off. Court was set for 10 a.m. on a Friday, but I was outside the courthouse by 9:15, coffee in hand, folder under my arm, and the clearest head I'd had in months. The courthouse wasn't flashy. Beige walls, squeaky linoleum floors, and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. It smelled like paper and coffee and nerves. I wasn't dressed like I was trying to impress anyone. Just slacks, a button-down, and that quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're about to win. One by one, my witnesses showed up. Uncle Ray, with his no-nonsense stare and arms folded like he was ready to bench press the entire courtroom. Jordan, who gave me a soft hug and said nothing, but I could feel the support. My coworker Matt even swung by, just to wait outside with me. He told me, "This is going to be good," and handed me a protein bar like I was about to run a marathon. At 9:58, Kevin arrived. Late, of course. He walked in wearing a zip-up hoodie, faded jeans, and that same smirk he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. Right behind him was Aunt Renee, looking like she'd just come from yoga class, phone already in hand, probably live texting someone about how unfair the world was. They barely acknowledged me. Kevin flicked his eyes toward me once, rolled his shoulders like he was stretching before a pickup game, and leaned back against a wall like this was just some minor inconvenience. That wouldn't last. We were called into the small claims courtroom shortly after 10. The room was humble, plain wooden benches, a single flag behind the judge's chair, and a whiteboard that hadn't been used in probably a decade. Judge Henderson was presiding. A woman in her 60s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of no-nonsense presence that made people sit up straighter just by walking in. She began calmly, asking for both parties to introduce themselves. I stood. Luke Carter. Plaintiff. Kevin stood too. Kevin Daniels. Defendant. Renee raised her hand slightly, trying to speak. I'm his mother and legal. Are you the owner of the vehicle in question? The judge asked without even glancing up. Renee hesitated. Well, no, but... Then I'll ask you to remain silent unless you're called to testify. Boom. First win of the day. I didn't even have to say a word. The judge turned to me. Mr. Carter, please explain the situation from your perspective. I opened my folder, pulled out the title, the insurance documents, and the printed police report, and began speaking in the calmest, clearest tone I could manage. I bought a used 2014 Toyota Corolla 3 years ago. Paid it off completely earlier this month. On the evening of date, I returned home from work, parked the vehicle outside my home, and went inside. About 30 minutes later, the vehicle was no longer there. I reported it stolen. I handed the judge the documents, one by one. Each time, she looked them over with quiet approval. I later received a photo from an unknown number. It was my cousin Kevin, posing with the vehicle. I then received a phone call from his mother, Renee, stating Kevin had taken the car because he needed a fresh start and that I should not panic. I pulled out the photo and the screenshots of the texts. The next day, I notified my insurance and continued cooperating with the police investigation. After consulting with legal counsel, I filed for a writ of replevin to legally reclaim my vehicle. The judge took the papers without a word, flipping through them slowly. Then she turned to Kevin. "Mr. Daniels, do you have a response?" Kevin shifted his weight, glancing at Renee. She gave him a slight nod, like she was coaching him silently. "Well," Kevin said, putting on the fake humility he always wore when he needed to lie, "I didn't steal it. I borrowed it. We're family. I was going to give it back. I just needed it for a bit while I got back on my feet." Judge Henderson tilted her head slightly. "Did you have permission to borrow the vehicle?" Kevin hesitated. "Well, no, not exactly, but my mom told me Luke wouldn't mind." Renee started to stand up again, but the judge shut her down with a raised hand. "I need to be clear," the judge said. "Did the registered owner of the vehicle, Mr. Carter, give you explicit permission to use the vehicle?" Kevin's face tightened. "No, but then this is unauthorized use of private property. In many cases, this would qualify as theft." Renee finally broke. "But he's family. You can't seriously be treating this like a crime. He was just trying to survive." Judge Henderson turned to her calmly. "Ma'am, familial relation does not override ownership rights. What your son did was not just irresponsible, it was unlawful. And the law does not grant immunity to relatives simply because they feel entitled." Kevin's face flushed red. That smug confidence cracked for the first time. The judge continued. "Mr. Carter, do you still wish to pursue the writ of replevin and reclaim the vehicle?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have any evidence the vehicle has been damaged, altered, or excessively driven since the date in question?" I pulled out the final set of documents. Printouts of public Instagram stories, a log of mileage estimates from my last oil change, and statements from my neighbor confirming unusual driving patterns. The judge read through it, nodded once, then made her ruling. "This court grants the writ of replevin to Mr. Carter. Law enforcement will be authorized to retrieve the vehicle immediately. Furthermore, any repairs or costs incurred due to unauthorized use may be pursued separately through a civil claim, should Mr. Carter choose to do so." Renee gasped. Kevin muttered something under his breath that I couldn't hear. But I just stood there, calm and quiet. The gavel came down with a soft bang. And just like that, it was done. Later that afternoon, I stood at the edge of Kevin's driveway next to a local deputy as a tow truck backed up toward my car. Kevin didn't come outside. He stood behind the curtain in the living room, a silhouette watching his empire collapse. Renee came out, flailing her arms like she could somehow undo the judgment. "You're ruining his life over a car." I didn't even look at her. I handed the deputy my ID, signed the release papers, and nodded to the driver. The car rolled up onto the flatbed slowly, its tires groaning as they left the concrete. As it rose, I finally turned to Renee. "No," I said. "He ruined his life the moment he decided to take something that wasn't his. I'm just collecting what's mine." I got into Matt's car and followed the tow truck to the impound lot, where they released my vehicle to me once the papers cleared. It wasn't in perfect condition. There were food wrappers in the back seat, a new scratch along the passenger door. The air freshener had been replaced with one of those little tree-shaped ones that smelled like cheap cologne. But it was mine. And when I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, I smiled. Not because I had the car back, but because I had me back. The fallout was slow, but satisfying. Word traveled through the family fast. For the first time, people started calling me instead of Kevin. Some were shocked. Some were impressed. A few apologized for not realizing how bad it had gotten. Uncle Ray sent me a bottle of bourbon with a note that said, "About time someone stood up to him." Jordan invited me over for dinner and said, "You've got the whole family rethinking their priorities." Even my mom, 2 weeks later, called and said, "I didn't handle things right, but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." I believed her. But the best part? Kevin didn't show up at the next family event. Neither did Renee. And no one asked where they were. Because for once, the silence wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. A month later, I got a small check in the mail. Insurance covered some minor repairs from the damage Kevin caused. Nothing major. But tucked in the envelope was a hand-signed letter from the adjuster. In all my years working in claims, I've never seen someone handle family theft this cleanly. Kudos for doing it the right way. I taped that note inside the glove compartment, just as a reminder. Because for the first time in my life, I hadn't just survived the storm. I'd rewritten the forecast. They took from me thinking I'd stay quiet. They forgot I'd learned how to roar in silence. And now, I drive with the windows down, music up, wind in my face, and not once do I check the rearview mirror for them. They're not behind me. They're not anywhere near me. And that's exactly where they belong.